Good day, everyone. Very welcome to the Being Abundance podcast. And of course, also our viewers on the live stream on Facebook. Also, very much welcome. Today, we're speaking about the law of inexhaustibility. That is the seventh law of abundance, the seventh mystical law of abundance. And the laws of abundance is sharing how the universe operates if it comes to abundance. Today I speak again with my great friend Sujith Ravindran. Sujith, nice to meet you again, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, this good Sunday morning, Koen. Thank you. Thank you for holding space. And as always, I'd love to invite all of us and our listeners to start with a little recentering. So, if you have any electronic devices around you that you don't need, my invitation would be for you to put it on silence and away from your energy field. I don't mean you should throw it on the floor or smash it on the wall. Just gently put it away
Yeah.
and find a comfortable position where you can be seated, preferably with your feet on the ground and your spine free from your backrest, shoulders relaxed, eyes gently closed. And bring your attention to your body. Feel your body. Scan your body. And as you scan your body, breathe deeply in and out. And notice anywhere any ease or lightness. And observe any discomforts or heaviness anywhere. And wherever you notice any heaviness, hold your attention on that spot and breathe deeply into that spot and release. Once again, and gently move your attention to your heart region and connect with your heartbeat. Feel your heartbeat. It is a beautiful sensation listening to your heartbeats at all times. It makes us a more loving person. Become one with your heartbeats and continue to remain connected with your heartbeats at all times. As we return back into our conversation around the law of inexhaustibility. One more deep breath. Thank you, Koen, and over to you.
Thank you, Sujith. How powerful to recenter, to take a moment of silence, the space from which everything arises. So today we speak about the law of inexhaustibility. And the question is, of course, in which context do we have to understand this principle of inexhaustibility? Could you share what you mean with the law of inexhaustibility? And I know it's not necessarily your law; it's actually an ancient way of looking at life. It's a universal wisdom. Please
Exactly.
enlighten us with
It
it.
is a universal law. It's a
Mm,
universal law, Koen. Indeed. Thanks for that question. Um, you know, what do we do? Most of us, we very casually treat all resources or assets as wealth. That is a very casual use of the word wealth. And that creates so much confusion in our lives because we confuse the understanding of wealth. And because we confuse it, we might possess a lot of something and yet feel very poor or miserable. So there's a lot of confusion around the idea of wealth. And here is where the sages clear it up for us with the seventh law, the law of inexhaustibility. The law of inexhaustibility says that what is inexhaustible when shared is wealth, is true wealth. While what is exhaustible when shared is just a resource.
mm,
So the idea of what is true wealth can be understood, Kuhn, just by simply doing this one sanity check. You know, this thing that I have in plenty in my life, when I share it with others, is it exhausting? Is it running out at my side? Is it reducing at my side? Or is it remaining constant at my side even while I share it with others, or sometimes even multiplying at my side while I put it out, share it out with others? If it is not reducing at my side or even growing at my side while I continue to share more of it, then that is true wealth.
mm. So, if I understand you correctly, what is true wealth? Well, let's say happiness is true wealth because at the moment you share happiness, and that could be through a smile or being present. If you share your presence, your smile with someone, it's inexhaustible. Actually, when I share my smile with my neighbor, it could happen that he shares that same smile with his wife. And in that way,
Oh,
it's real wealth, right?
oh, what a wise man you are, indeed. That the way you simplified it goes so much further than the way I approach it from the mystical perspective. Yes, exactly. Happiness and smile are true examples of wealth. Love is another one.
Mm,
Passion in the heart is another one. You feel passionate about something, and you're going for it, you're sharing that passion with others, like local heroes, your dharmic project, local heroes, the forgetting the superman superwomen heroes like Mandela and Gandhi, and looking around in our neighborhood for the everyday heroes, that being a passion of yours, like, it's very contagious, that passion. When you share it the way you share it, I get all fired up. I get all passionate about that project, wanting to see that project happen. So you see, your passion is an amazing wealth because you share that passion with me, and I get fired up.
Mm.
And same thing, like you said, happiness, smile, love. You know, I don't know anybody who, like, in the act of sharing their love with somebody else, they end up being miserable in the end. I don't know anybody like that. There might
Yeah.
be people like that, but I haven't met, come across them. You see, that's true wealth.
Yeah. Now, the sentence that you shared had two components. You said what is inexhaustible when shared is wealth or true wealth. So we shared already that it could be happiness, love, passion. But you also shared what is exhaustible when shared is a resource.
Hmm.
What do you mean with that?
It's just a resource. Norway is considered like a wealthy country, and a big reason, why it is called wealthy in many of the wealth indexes or routine definitions is because Norway owns a lot of petroleum, up there in the Arctic Ocean. And, you know, so wealthy country. I would prefer to call Norway a resource rich country. Now, the reason why I'm talking about petroleum is because, you know, it's not a wealth. The more and more we consume um, petroleum, the less and less we are left with on the planet. So anything while you consume reduces in its quantum in the process of sharing or consuming is just a resource.
Mm.
So petroleum is a good example of just a resource, or any other natural resources which are in limited quantity
Yeah.
is just a resource.
But then I would have to say that a lot of people think that we need those resources to actually sustain our lives. So there is no judgment there by saying that what is exhaustible is a resource, right? It's just also part of life that we use and maybe also need resources to be present on this planet. Or how do you look upon that?
Beautiful question. Beautiful question. You know, um, there is a holistic homeostasis that is a constant quest of humanity, not just humanity, every living being. If you look at the bees and the flowers, there is a homeostasis there. If you look at humans and nature, there's a homeostasis there.
What do you mean with
It's a,
homeostasis?
it's a balance. It's kind of there is a harmonic balance
Mm.
there. Good question. you know I have, by default, I keep using this word because I picked up this word somewhere along my journeys. But indeed, you demystifying that word. You see, this harmonious balance we are seeking is not just a tolerance or a coexistence, it is a synergy there. And we constantly, consciously or unconsciously, yearn that synergy with nature, with the environment. The reason why the highly awakened, conscious, many souls who are environmentalists, not all, many, who are environmentalists, you know, they have such an important role, because they're constantly alerting us to this lack of homeostasis.
Mm.
So, you know, judgment or no judgment, Koen, when we talk about petroleum, it's worth asking. In fact, you're not the first person, neither am I, asking this question. What does petroleum serve? And the moment we are clear about the purpose of petroleum, we can use our intuition, our imagination, our intention, etc., to create true wealth, alternate wealth from resource to wealth.
Hmm.
Like in the book, The Seven Mystical Laws of Abundance,
Hmm.
I refer to wind and solar energy
Mm.
as true wealth. Like, if you consume wind, to generate energy,
Yeah.
electricity, or sunlight. In the process, sunlight is not reducing on the earth. It is still there. We are consuming it, but it doesn't halve at the same time. So it's a wealth. And it is extremely important in the world we live in today. 2020 was a complete lockdown because of the pandemic. Not that I'm complaining. It has been one of the best years of my life. And I don't want to sound narcissistic saying that. I'm just putting on my abundance self, abundance consciousness, and transforming 2020 into a revolutionary year
Mm.
for me, myself, has been a great joy. Now, 2021 is heading in the same direction. It's going to be a lockdown. Now, I'm listening to futurists uh, in my network, and they even say that 2022 and even perhaps 2023 could meet a similar fate as 2020. So it's extremely valuable to take this downtime to step back and truly, truly meditate on the seventh law.
Yeah.
Truly, because everything is now demanding that we ask ourselves what is wealth and what is resource,
Yeah.
because we have to pivot. If there is one important shift we as humanity create during from the lessons of the lockdown,
Hmm.
it is that we must pivot from the use of resources to the use of wealth,
Yeah.
because humanity, the pain that humanity is going through, not just the ecological pain, the reason why COVID hit, but also look at it, the loneliness, the depression, the health challenges, the loss of loved ones, the loss of an income or economic prosperity. So many people suffering in so many ways. Seventh law has become so pivotal in asking this first simple practice: what is wealth? What is resource? How can I trade more of the wealth and trade less of the resource?
Yeah. Beautiful. I do believe indeed also that now is the time to find inner wealth. But I have to say also one thing is that when you share about solar energy, wind energy, it's true that those resources are inexhaustible or that wealth is inexhaustible. But to harness it, you have to build like wind parks, solar parks to actually harness that wealth. And that costs also the planet. So, I mean, yes, it's beautiful to say like that the sun is inexhaustible in some sense, to some degree. One day the sun will also explode, of course, but to harness it, it still costs a lot of energy, right?
You know, of course, it does. Yet, that is the power of human ingenuity, Kuhn. You know, we have put a man on the moon. We have, the idea of impossible is the most, it's a word that we must absolutely delete. It shouldn't belong in our dictionary. Impossible. No, the human ingenuity is so immense that for us, if only we are able to intention it, to create the right insights or illuminations, to wrap our head around an idea, imagine it, and infuse life into that intention, then it'll materialize. Of
Mm,
course, there is material cost involved. Like, we invented the airplane, and now people, especially with the low cost airlines and all that, the normal folks can travel, can go to all kinds of different cultures and see the beauty, the magic of the world, but it comes with a cost. You know, building the airplanes and the pollution and all of that.
Mm.
Yet, human ingenuity is such that, today's engines produce only 40% of the emissions that their ancestors used to create. And
Yes.
it continues to come down, continues to come down. The only thing to make anything possible, the only thing, and I will repeat this if needed, the only thing possible to make anything possible, the only thing needed to make anything possible is will,
Yeah.
uh, an undivided desire to want it. And if we have that completely, that desire coming from an undivided heart to want, hopefully something noble and virtuous, not something evil, even the evil ones can manifest. But if it is noble according to the laws of giving and receiving, then it'll manifest. Everything is possible.
Yeah.
So yes, building a solar park, why not? There are costs involved, like building a refinery, or building a clean energy car engine. You know, takes effort, takes resources, takes costs. Yet human ingenuity is so limitless that we can deal with everything only if we have the will.
Now, we share about true wealth, and then we speak about like inner love, uh, happiness, peace. When you share your peace, it will not exhaust. But you share that true wealth is inexhaustible. And I know you as a contemporary sage mystic, as someone that even can explain why that is. Why is true
Well,
wealth inexhaustible? Um,
mm,
could you share your light upon that?
well, firstly, that one thought that you referred to, the inner wealth, it's not just inner wealth for that reason. Allow me to take a minute on, our usual culprit when it comes to wealth. Most of us, whenever we think of wealth, we think of money. Money is equated with wealth. Yet, money is such a subjective thing that in a lot of people's hands, money is just a resource. And that depends on our relationship with money, our inner relationship. For most people, I know money is just a resource. They spend it and it reduces at their end. That's a resource according to the seventh law of abundance. But I know many, many people, and this is not a very small minority, this is a rapidly growing minority, in whose hands money is a wealth. So they spend money, and in the process, in the act of spending, it just ends up multiplying, whether in their own hands or in other people's hands. It just ends up multiplying. So in some people's hand, money is just a resource. In other people's hands, money can be wealth.
Hmm.
Like I know for myself, like the money that I spend on my children, I truly, truly know it's wealth in my hands, because it it that money acquires infinite form in that act of spending on my kids. infinite form. It multiplies so much in so many forms. Like one, when I spend it on my children, it's not a cost, it's an expenditure. It's not a cost or expenditure, it's an investment. Because, you know, I'm supporting them grow up. And as they continue to grow and grow and grow, they are going to be assets to humanity. I want them to be good, compassionate human beings. Grow up with those values rather than become, super athletes. You know, I'm not stopping them from being super athletes or a Mozart or anything. No. But first and foremost, just being good, compassionate human beings. And my expenditure is an investment. So in my hand, the money that I spend on my children is an investment. And then it also goes in many other directions because the joy, the contentment that I receive in the act of my fatherhood, providing for them, that fills me up with that contentment, that joy. That again, is an addition to the flow of wealth. The joy, the play, the laughter, the love that my kids bring into the lives of others because they are healthy, well provided for, that again is multiplying.
Mm.
So, money is an interesting thing
Mhm.
that in some people's hands, it is just a resource. In other people's hands, it is wealth.
Yeah.
And that all just depends on how we treat money. I know many, many extremely wealthy people, you could call them billionaires in euro terms, who are extremely poor within. For them, they have loads and loads of money, but they can't even sleep peacefully for 1 hour in the night. They need medication to go to sleep because they obsess so much about losing that money. So you see, I would rather be somebody who has less of money,
Mm.
but it be wealth in my life, but rather than a lot of money and, lose sleep over it.
Yeah.
So that was that one point around money. And you had a question around, why is wealth inexhaustible, right?
Exactly.
Ah, the did you want to share something?
No, I just when you share about this, I just have to think about A Christmas Carol and Scrooge. That the Scrooge in the story is super rich, but he doesn't know how to share, and in that way he's operating from inner scarcity. And the ghost that visits him in the night shares with him what this inner scarcity does with his surrounding, with his ecosystem. And so he's very rich, but his reality is very poor. So I
Wow.
understand what you shared with that. Um, but indeed, let us get back to that question. Like, why is wealth, true wealth, why
Mm.
is true wealth inexhaustible?
It's the one thing, and here is where a little bit of mysticism comes in. The understanding that wealth or abundance is infinite. It is the universe. In the universe is contained infinite wealth, infinite abundance of everything. The vibrations of love, even the idea of money is infinite. You know, um, it's only when we recognize ourselves
Mhm.
to be separate from the universe, call it the unmanifest, the field of pure potentiality, a field where the potential for all manifestation contains. In that field, wealth is infinite, abundant. I have a great friend from the Far East, who proved when it comes to money, he proved that money is also infinite. So I'm not even talking about, the traders, that stratosphere of banking where they are multiplying money every day, so much so that there are, you cannot put enough number of zeros next to the one to put to quantify the amount of money there is in that stratosphere. There is enough money in that stratosphere for every single human being on the planet to be prosperous. There is that much money in that stratosphere. I'm not even talking about that stratosphere. There is another realm of the universe, the unmanifest, that field of pure potentiality where abundance is infinite. All abundance, anything that you think as abundance is infinite. All you need to do is tap into that field. Just tap into that field. And I was referring to this Far Eastern friend of mine. He, the first time I met him, he lived in this very finite paradigm of money. He truly, truly believed that money is finite and I must work, sweat hard. And he actually spent a couple of decades of his life, for working extremely hard to grab a portion of the money that is available, even with the belief system that, I'm taking this money and I'm keeping, and in the process, somebody is losing. That is the mentality that most money managers have, by the way. That when I am accumulating or hoarding money, I know somebody is losing out, which is not true. The universe has got a bank account with infinite amount of money in it. Now, this Far Eastern gentleman, when he came into my orbit first many years ago, he was in that paradigm. And he also made a lot of money, but not unhappy, very guilt-ridden, etc. And I introduced him into the 7 laws. And also we started practicing some of the practices around the 7 laws, among which is fully embodying the idea of self-attunement, attuning the self with the cosmos, the universe, the unmanifest. And as he continued on that journey, he started to realize, not just understand, but realize that indeed wealth is infinite and wealth is holistic. It's not just money, but a lot of things around our wealth. And if we can dabble in all those forms of wealth, then we are truly wealthy. Now, what ended up happening is, in the end, this gentleman, he went ahead and he launched his own cryptocurrency. You heard of the cryptocurrency these days?
Yeah, like Bitcoins, Ripple. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, blockchain, cryptocurrency. He launched his own cryptocurrency. So it doesn't cost anything. You don't need a government. You don't need gold backing. You don't need, an institution. You don't need permission, whatever it is. He went ahead and he just created his own cryptocurrency, which obviously means that you and I, or your partner, or my partner, or our neighbor, anybody on the planet can start a cryptocurrency. Anybody can do that. Now, he started a cryptocurrency, And he let that cryptocurrency grow. Remember cryptocurrency, there is no material to touch and feel there. Today, he's a millionaire in dollar terms. He's a millionaire, just like that. See, still, and he can, of course, he's cashed a lot of that cryptocurrency and he's having a good life in the material paradigm. But you think of cryptocurrency. What is that? It's just a form of energy. It is an energetic form of the fiat money or the normal concept of money. He just created wealth, financial wealth out of nowhere using cryptocurrency. The point I'm trying to make is, yes, wealth is inexhaustible. True wealth is inexhaustible because it flows from the unmanifest. It from this causal plane, where abundance is infinite.
I
And
understand.
we just need to tap into it. We just need to learn how to tap into that unmanifest. Like, the 7 laws are keys to tap into that unmanifest.
Yeah. Okay. But to tap into that, true wealth, I have to think also about like the former very rich people that were applying nepotism, and they shared their wealth with their children, and those children shared it with their children. I mean, I know if you share wealth with your children, it will go in omnidirections, in every kind of direction, because they are raised as loving, caring beings. But there are also families, and I don't mean that as a complot, as something that is, but I know there are families that keep their wealth within their own family. How can we tap into that wealth that is in this on this planet, like trillions of dollars, and how can we actually let that money trickle down the pyramid of Maslow? That actually the people, the lowest part of the pyramid, will find that wealth that is actually there, the trillions of dollars.
This easiest answer is, clone many more versions of Koen on the planet.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's one of the 2 suggestions. Shall we go into the second one?
Yes, please.
Um, you know, great observation. Great observation. We talk about the economic divide today on the planet. It is not an economic divide. What we are experiencing is truly a consciousness divide.
Yeah.
It is not an economic divide. The economic divide is just a consequence of our consciousness divide.
Mm-hmm.
That those who have access to such large pool of resources like money, they are, unfortunately, most of them are caught in the most primate consciousness, the most self-preservatory consciousness, that they are, in spite of having enough for the next 100 generations, truly, if you look inside them, they're struggling with the fear of not surviving, of the fear of, the constant obsession of with self-preservation. Knowing you, Koen, as an example, some of the many other examples that we have in the Being Abundance team, what makes them the true leaders, the true heroes on the planet, is that they are of a different consciousness. They are not obsessed with the self-preservation. They are leaning towards self-realization, and not just their own personal self-realization, but our collective realization, realization of our collective human potential. You see, that is a completely different level of consciousness, one of unity consciousness, one of, being in selfless service, knowing that, our family is just extension of the self, our community is an extension of the self, our nation is an extension of the self, the entire human race is an extension of the self. What we call environment or nature or ecology, including the plants and animals, are just extensions of the self. So if we, if our consciousness is so primitive that we recognize that self ends at the skin, that is where the notion of self ends, then imagine how small a human being that is, consciousness wise. And it is also such a human being, and I don't want to sound judgmental, you know, picking on any human being. There's just an evolutionary process that, humanity is on. Now, those among us who consciously or unconsciously believe that the self ends at the skin, they are the ones who, in spite of having trillions out there, they hold on to it, because they are so bankrupt within that they haven't experienced the true joy of sharing.
Mm.
And so, summary there is, what we are facing today is not an economic divide. The economic divide is just a symptom of a deeper divide, which is the consciousness divide.
Yeah.
So, the best we can do, so coming to the second point, the first one being, multiplying the Koens on the planet. The second thing we can do is to hold space for those among us who are, struggling in the self-preservation consciousness, to awaken to the subtler and the causal realms of consciousness.
Mm. When I hear you speak, I think that we're not necessarily have an economic crisis, but it's also, you could say, a spiritual crisis, or a crisis of beingness, in the sense of that we are born as natural givers, you could say. As children, we
Yeah.
love to give. We are undivided beings. We see also in other children, when we are young, we see ourselves. Actually, the idea of self, of an ego, of me to protect myself, is something that grows through conditioning. While when you are young, when you in the time that you play with marbles, at that time maybe you still felt like interconnected with other people. So do you agree that we can bridge this gap by actually focusing on education, on youth, that we are raised in a awareness that ourself doesn't stop at our skin, but that we see ourselves in other, and that, like for instance, I had once a dream that I dreamt that when I gave something to someone, that other being was me, and that being gave something to another, and that was also part of me, and me in the sense of life. um,
Wow.
do you agree that education is crucial, and I mean true education, not necessarily to learn how we can be great consumers, but how we can be great
Yeah.
human beings?
Wow. Wow. First of all, Koen, allow me to acknowledge that one thought, that dream that you shared. When you give something to someone, both of you become one. What a beautiful way of putting a sentiment of oneness. Yes. You know, if there is one practice we can do to expand our notion of oneness, it is the practice of sharing. That is also the reason why in the Being Abundance movement, which is going for the formal launch on the 13th of April, in the Being Abundance movement, the slogan is elevate the being, spirit of sharing, abundant humanity.
Mm,
The spirit of sharing, it is innate within us. As much as life, being alive is a qualifier, a quality of a human being, so is the spirit of sharing. It is that innate to the notion of humanness. And children, when we are born with that sat, the awareness of that truth, that we are one, that we are beyond time, beyond space, that there are beyond space means there is no partition between you and I. We just know it. We can't articulate it in a language that adults understand, but we are born with that realization. And that therein comes the role of education. You know, um, on YouTube, you can watch some videos around, the idea of paravidya, the subjective education, the education of the subjective self. Now, this one component, you know, uh, we cannot just brush all of education as good or bad. Like we cannot just say every resource that we have on the planet is wealth. That is a mistaken notion of wealth. Similarly, we also need to approach education with a viveka, a sense of proper discernment, good understanding, or even discrimination of what is right education, what isn't. Now, if you and I, Koen, we can agree that children are born, with the notion of oneness, then it's very easy to blame our current education system. That, if we are born with that wisdom, that knowingness, then what goes wrong? Because we go through 12, 16 years of education, and we end up with, people who see that they are apart from each other. So the idea is that, great, we should always preserve all the good things of our objective education. Objective education means like the mathematics and the physics and the geography and the history, etc. Yes, we should preserve that. There's good things in there, which, by the way, we don't even need to do anything, because Google is there. Yeah, Google is there. We can just go with Google now. And we need to bring back the subjective education, which was once upon a time there until, religion hijacked it.
yeah.
The subjective education became, more and more a class for indoctrination, rather than, helping people understand the self.
Yeah.
And when that got overboard in advanced countries like lands like Netherlands, they pushed it out of the curriculum, simply because it was like, hey, stop with this indoctrination,
Yeah.
this brainwashing.
So what do you
So they
what do you understand is subjective education, to make it more clear? How does a subjective education looks to you in the most perfect way?
subjective education is the education of the self.
Yeah.
All these things that we together explore in these calls are all, the curriculum of the subjective education.
Yeah.
So subjective education is basically the wisdom of the self. Now, bringing that back, and that does not only mean the seven mystical laws of abundance, but also like the recentering that we start with, the understanding of Satchit Ananda, that, we are true oneness, the spirit of sharing we talked about, the our subtler consciousness behind our relationship with wealth.
Yeah.
All of this needs to come back into our curriculum.
Yeah.
And then you will notice, and the best part is, you know, when I meet most of the young people I know, most, I'm not saying all, most of the young people that I meet, I am amazed with the level of consciousness they are in. That in spite of all the conditioning through media, the parenting, schooling, all of that, they are such wise souls that sometimes I get the feeling like, probably the best justice we can do to these kids is just take them out of school and don't let education poison them or condition them.
Yeah.
So, indeed, it's not so much about introducing education or anything. It's just about rethinking, you know, the consciousness component of education.
Yeah. And when you talk about the education of the self, the word the self is sometimes wrongly understood, but it's because it's a translation out of the Sanskrit. But the self, you could say, like our our true being, you could say. So it's not necessarily
Yeah.
only contained to our body. It's not only our ego that you try to understand. It's actually the whole universe and our role within that universe that you try to understand in those lessons. Then, so for
Beautifully put.
yeah. So now, actually, I know that there are people watching and say, wow, I would love to have like a hint of this education. And I'm looking at the time. So, what are the four practices of the seventh law, the law of inexhaustibility, that we could
Hmm.
actually practice daily, that we can actually see that it is true what we are sharing?
Very much, very much. Indeed, we're coming to the end of our time. So, slowly starting to wrap up, loose ends, and also, reaffirming the announcement for what is waiting to come in the next season, etc. Taking a couple of minutes on all of that is extremely valuable. But, in the book, The Seven Mystical Laws of Abundance, indeed, I have very briefly highlighted four practices that each one of us can adopt in order for the seventh law to come alive in our lives. And the first one is the practice of trading in wealth, not in resources. Because remember, wealth grows when it flows. I've touched upon this in the first chapter, the first law, the law of exchange. The wealth grows when it flows. Even the economists agree with it. The reason why, whenever there is an economic crisis on a certain land, the first thing that the economists and the governments urge is to lower taxes, put more money in the hands of the consumers so that consumer spending goes up. And when consumer spending goes up, the economy lifts back again. That is, wealth grows when it flows. The mystics and the economists agree on this. The idea is trade as much as possible in wealth and not in resources. Because trading in resources will always be a zero sum game. So trade in wealth. If money means wealth for you, then spend money in such a way it multiplies, whether it's in the hands of the receivers, it multiplies, whether it's in your hands, it multiplies, or whether it multiplies in the hands of third parties. third persons. Trade in wealth, not in resources. That is one of the four practices. The second one, fascinating one, transform resources into wealth. It is possible to transform resources into wealth. This might seem a little subjective, but no. You know, even the act of spending money, it can suddenly become wealth. You might have less of it, but you spend it, and in the act of spending, you might have even less of it. But you will have even less of it only if you think in very local terms. That is, if you think that I am separate from others, from you, from the receiver. And if I think that money only acquires the form of the currency, these are wrong notions. Once I abolish these notions of the self being confined apart from the others, and the form of money is just finite or one form localized, and we become non-localized, then we suddenly notice we've transformed resource into wealth. In the act of spending that money, we are multiplying joy, love, togetherness, oneness, all of that at our level, at their level, but also at the collective humanitarian and ecological level. That is one way of transforming resources into wealth. So that is the second practice. The third one is to become wealthy instead of being resource rich. And that means, having a great sense of discrimination, what is a resource and what is wealth, which is, in the first practice of the four practices. Now, there is an added component. Becoming wealthy means to align with the unmanifest, with the universe. Do your self-attunement. And you will notice that you will align with that infinite bank account out there that has got, infinite amount of all wealth, including financial, that we can tap into. So the third practice is your own self-attunement in order to align with the universe. And the last one is becoming a wealth for others. Becoming a wealth for others. Be such a human being, an awakened human being, such a human being that you are a wealth for others. Because you have such an enormous power. I see that my video is freezing. Never mind. We have such an enormous power to become a wealth in other people's life that we can inspire so many people to do so many magical things. Mm-hmm. That is the fourth of the four practices, becoming a wealth for others. So these are the four practices that I've laid out in the book on how we can embody the seventh law.
Yeah. When you speak, I have to think about a story about a monk that lived in Japan. And one day a thief visited the monk's hut at the base of a mountain, only to discover there was nothing to steal. And the monk returned. The monk returned and caught the thief. And the monk said, "You have come a long way to visit me," he told the thief, "and you should not return empty-handed. Please take my clothes as a gift." And the thief was bewildered, so he took the clothes and slunk away. And then the monk sat naked, watching the moon, and he said to himself, "Poor fellow, I wish I could have given him this beautiful moon." And for me, that shares everything that you just shared. I mean, you can have not much money, but you can have inner wealth. That is so much more.
Hmm.
That is so much more, because if you are fully wealthy within, then there is no problem with sharing. So thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for holding space,
Mhm.
Koen. You know, uh, it's beautiful. The seventh law is a beautiful one, for us to embody a new understanding of abundance.
Mm.
And it's not by accident that the seventh law is the seventh law, not the sixth or the fifth. It has got a perfection in being at the end of the series of seven laws. And that also means this series of our 8 episodes that we committed to for this podcast to lay out the seven laws comes to an end.
Yeah.
And like we understand from the principle of Shiva, end is not the end. End is actually setting us up for new starts. So I know that there are two announcements at least that for we have to make. One has got to do with the launch, upcoming launch of the abundance movement, and another one is about the ongoing season 2 series. So why don't you share any thoughts you have on that second season series?
Yeah. Well, the beauty is that we shared now wisdom from the seven laws of abundance, the seven mystical laws of abundance. And I have the feeling that we live in times that we see actually daily reflected what inner scarcity does, what inner abundance does. So our new series will tap into news, into actual events that are happening around us. And I will pick one theme, one event, one news event, and I will share it with Sujit, and I will hold space for him to share his wisdom, his ancient wisdom upon themes that are actually having everyday impact on our lives. So that will be our new season,
Yes.
our second season. It will be shorter. It will be like 20 minutes, because we hear from the field around us that people love to have like a short break during their daily work of 20 minutes of reflecting upon themselves. So we are happy to provide it. You will hear from us on which day that will be, but it will be from next week onwards. And then
Yeah.
we will actually put it out there. It will no longer be a live stream. It will be a recording, because will we would love to see also your reactions, and have a one-to-one conversation with you. And now we are very much caught up in our own conversation, but we are also very keen upon what we will learn from you. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And of course, and that is something that Sujit and me are also very keen and very, yeah, we're looking forward, is the launch of the Being Abundance movement, the movement that is actually implementing all this wisdom.
Yeah.
So when will be this, Sujit? You,
13th of April.
wow.
We've
Yeah.
not finalized the time, but simply be in touch with us on beingabundance.org. Put in your name there so that we can communicate the details, or through facebook.com/beingabundance.org. That page also, the Facebook Being Abundance movement page. We'll be in touch. It's a
Yeah.
very, very exciting moment because we've come so amazingly far with hundreds of very, very generous people giving their selfless contribution to build all the building blocks of the Being Abundance movement. So now, making it available to the larger humanity, and leaning in and holding space for the human evolution on our consciousness of from the consciousness of inner scarcity to the consciousness of inner abundance. That is so exciting. So 13th of April, that is really a ceremony for that wider sharing.
Yeah. It will be celebrational. It will be musical. It will be, in some sense, educational. And I'm very sure it will be international, multicultural. So
Great.
looking forward. Yeah, beautiful.
Lovely.
Thank you for
Great.
this. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you too, Koen, for being who you are and for this time spent together. Bye bye.
Bye bye.